Today, we're going to talk about one of the most monumental and, frankly, one of the most tragic events of the 20th century. We're talking about the 1947 partition of British India. It was a moment that was supposed to be about freedom, but what it delivered was a catastrophe on an almost unimaginable scale. You know, for generations, people across the Indian subcontinent had dreamed of this day, the day they would finally be free from colonial rule. But when that sun of independence finally rose in 1947, it cast two long, dark shadows across the land. One of those shadows was named India, and the other, Pakistan. Freedom had arrived, but it came at a truly devastating cost.
So, how on earth did this happen? Well, to get it, you've got to understand the bigger picture. A world war had just ripped across the globe, and the once mighty British Empire, well, it was starting to crumble.
The one thing you really need to grasp here is the sheer speed of it all. I mean, it happened so fast. After World War II, Britain was just broke. It couldn't afford its empire anymore. So negotiations to hand over power started in 1946. But then the last viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, shows up in early 1947. He takes one look at the situation and makes a massive, fateful decision. He moves the date for independence way up to August 1947. We're talking almost a year ahead of schedule. It was a decision that would have absolutely catastrophic consequences. But see, the main problem here wasn't just between Britain and India. A really deep ideological crack had formed within India itself, and that crack was about to split the subcontinent in two. At the very heart of this divide was something called the two-nation theory. Now, this was an idea pushed hard by Muhammad Ali Jinnah and the Muslim League. And the core idea was this: Hindus and Muslims weren't just followers of different religions. No. They were two completely separate nations, with different cultures, traditions, and histories. The fear was that in a united India, where Hindus were the majority, Muslims would be sidelined. And that idea, it just took off, leading to a powerful and ultimately an unstoppable demand. We want Pakistan. So you end up with these two completely competing visions for the future. On one side, you've got the Indian National Congress. Think Nehru, think Gandhi, and they're fighting for one single secular India where everybody can live together. But on the other side, the Muslim League is absolutely determined to get a separate homeland. And you can see, right? Those two goals just couldn't exist in the same reality. A unified independence was becoming pretty much impossible. Okay, so the decision is made. The country will be divided. That leads to the next terrifying question: how? I mean, how do you even begin to draw a line through a civilization that's thousands of years old? So the British pick this guy, Sir Cyril Radcliffe. He's a lawyer from London, and he's given this monumental, godlike task of drawing the borders for India and Pakistan. And here is the single most staggering fact of this entire story: he had never been to India. Not once. He was a total stranger to the land, the people, the rivers, the villages, everything he was about to tear apart. And how much time did they give him for this impossible job? 5 weeks. That's it. 35 days to decide the fate of millions. He had to split the huge, complex provinces of Punjab and Bengal, places where Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs had lived as neighbors for centuries. All of it was done using old maps and unreliable data. A line on a piece of paper was about to become a matter of life and death. And hey, don't just take my word for how chaotic this was. Radcliffe himself said later, and I quote, "I had not time. I had no maps. I could rely on nothing." That tells you everything, doesn't it? This wasn't some carefully planned process. It was a frantic, desperate rush to the exit. And the human cost? Well, it wasn't really part of the calculation. And that brings us to the moment itself: independence. But it's like a split screen. While political leaders are giving speeches and celebrating in the capital cities, out on those newly drawn borders, the land was on fire. Freedom and fire, they happened at the exact same time. You have to imagine hearing these iconic words from India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, on August 15th, 1947. At the stroke of the midnight hour, India will awake to life and freedom. I mean, it's so full of hope and promise. But for millions of people, those beautiful words meant nothing. Their reality was a world away. Because as those words were being spoken, an estimated 15 million people were being ripped from their homes. Just try to get your head around that number. 15 million. It was one of the largest, most violent migrations in all of human history. And the human cost of that line drawn in a hurry, it was just unthinkable.
Historians estimate that somewhere between 1 and 2 million people were killed in the violence that erupted. Men, women, and children who were just caught in the absolute madness of a division they never asked for.
The horror on the ground was absolute. You had Hindus and Sikhs desperately trying to get to the new India, and Muslims fleeing the other way towards the new Pakistan. People who had been neighbors their whole lives suddenly became enemies. You saw these massive columns of refugees walking for miles with nothing. And the trains became known as death trains. They'd pull into a station, and instead of being full of hopeful families, they'd be filled with dead bodies, a silent, gruesome message from the other side. And, the tragedy didn't just stop in 1947 or 48. That line that was drawn so quickly, it left behind these deep wounds that have shaped the politics, the identity, and the conflicts of the region ever since. In a very real way, the partition never really ended.
And as soon as the smoke from that initial explosion of violence began to clear, a new fire started. The state of Kashmir. It became the first major battleground, with both India and Pakistan claiming it as their own. Just months after independence, they were at war over it. The first of many wars that all trace their roots right back to the unresolved chaos of partition.
So that line, the one Sir Cyril Radcliffe drew in 5 weeks, it's not just on a map. It's still burning today. It divides not just land, but it divides families, histories, and futures. And it forces us to ask this really haunting question. Can a wound that was created so quickly and so violently ever truly heal?